Hello and welcome to EDA Reports. My name is Jerry Gordon. I'm the President and CEO of the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority. And today we're going to talk to two individuals who are from the business community who span the 50-year period of time during which the Economic Development Authority actually has existed. You're going to hear a very interesting discussion about how business has changed and how doing business has changed in Fairfax County. Today with us we have Mr. Sid Dewberry, who is the founder and chairman of Dewberry, the engineering company, one of the top companies in Fairfax County and one of the longest standing companies in Fairfax County. And Linda Bartlett, who is the senior vice president and controller from Intelsat Corporation, which is now in the process of moving into Fairfax County. So we actually span this 50-year period during which the authority has existed, and economic growth in the county has been quite successful. So thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Sid, tell us what you can think about from 50 years ago and how Dewberry came to be a business and what it was like doing business in the county in those days.
Okay, first I want to remind you of something that you probably have forgotten, Jerry. We had a small office building on Route 50. We had 2 floors in that building. Each floor had 5,000 square feet. We built it. We occupied the top floor, and we rented the lower floor. Guess who we rented it to?
I have forgotten.
The Fairfax County Economic Development Authority.
Yes, that is right.
You were our tenant in those days.
I thought we predated me.
I think that was when you first got started. It was like 1970.
The EDA was certainly just in its infancy then.
Yeah. Well, you were a good customer. You paid your rent on time, and we were delighted to have you. Well, it's been a pleasure doing business in Fairfax County. It's really been easy because Fairfax County is a boom town. There's no other way to describe it. I come from a large county, Southside Virginia, almost in North Carolina. It's 2.5 times larger than Fairfax County. It has 1,000 square miles, Pittsylvania County. Mm. The population of Pittsylvania County in 1960 was 66,000 people. It has shrunk. It's now 63,000. Huh. I couldn't find the population of Fairfax for 1960, but I think it was about the same. I know it had as many dirt roads in Fairfax County as we did in Pennsylvania County. Of course, the native population is 1.1 or 1.2
right.
million. It's just grown like crazy all these years. But we started our business in 1956. On Friday, April 13th, 1956 was a good luck day for us. We actually took over the engineering department of a home builder, M.T. Brohill and Sons. At that time was the largest builder in the Northern Virginia area. They were located in Arlington County. I ran the engineering department for them, and they hit some tough economic times, as builders often do. When the interest rates go up, houses stop selling. So they decided to get rid of all the things that they did in-house and outsource them, including the engineering department. Mm. So they came to me and said, well, you take it over. You can do all of our work, and we'll pay you weekly. But you got to prove to us that you can meet the payroll for a month. I think I had $250 or something like that to my name. So we found a financial backer, and they backed us. And the first year we had a real tough time because Brohill didn't have any business all at all because his business was down. And his son, Joe Brohill, had been elected to Congress, and he wasn't in there to help the business grow. But after a year to the day, we got 2 important jobs, and one of them was with Fairfax County. The builders were submitting plans like crazy, and there was a backlog for the county to review those plans and issue a permit for the builder to proceed with the construction. So they hired my firm, since we were new and hadn't done much work in the county. They thought we would not have a conflict of interest. And they said they would pay us $6 an hour for the time that we put on it. Now, we paid our guys about $3 or $3.50 an hour. But we had to go to the Board of Supervisors to get that contract approved. And Bonnie Rasmussen, who was the head reviewer, took me to the Board of Supervisors early one morning and presented in great detail to the board what they wanted to do to get this backlog of plans out of the way so the complaints from builders would stop. And after he had finished, the board, the chairman said, well, what does the board want to do? Well, there was absolute silence. No one said a word. Now, most of the board members then were a farmer from some farm here in the county. And they looked at each other for, I guess, just seconds, but it seemed like minutes to me. And finally, one guy looked to the other guy and says, well, Joe, what do you want to do? Joe thought for a few seconds. He says, well, it sounds like a good deal to me. Why don't we do it? So they approved it. And that was the way business was done pretty much in Fairfax County in those days. So we took off, and that was the beginning of a boom for us, really. Ever since then, it's been uphill. Now we started here in the county. Now you're talking about bringing businesses into the county like Linda, but we've started here in the county, and we've grown out into other jurisdictions all over the United States. We have 40 offices scattered throughout. This is our headquarters. But you've taken care of us. The county has taken care of us and given us the foundation to grow and to amount to something other places other than here.
Certainly over that period of time, doing engineering work in Fairfax County and construction support in Fairfax County has changed in terms of process, in terms of how things get done. How's it different?
Well, I've been trying to find out how many additional permits. Now, land use was in its infancy back in 1956. There was very few regulations. The subdivision ordinance, which was adopted in like 1950, and this was 1956, required you to build a street in front of all the houses. But you didn't have to pave it. It could be a dirt road, a gravel road. And along about that time, they required you to put tar and chips down on that gravel road, which helped a little bit. You didn't have to put in curb and gutter. The drainage was sort of took care of itself. And, but from there, the regulations have increased so dramatically. The public facilities manual now is a document at least that thick. And you really have to be a Philadelphia lawyer to understand it. There's so many regulations, and it takes so long to get a permit now to do something that it's really terrible. But regulations have just taken over. And in those days, you just sort of started construction. The only permit that I think is different, all the other permits are sort of similar, is the occupancy permit. I don't believe you had to get an occupancy permit to occupy your house or the office building or whatever it was. When the building was finished, the builder would say it's finished. The buyer or renter would look at it and say, well, it looks okay to me. So he'd settle and move in, and that was it. But today, you can't get an occupancy permit without jumping through all sorts of hoops. I won't go into the details of that, but that's the last thing that you have to get. You cannot move in until you have that occupancy permit.
Wow.
So regulations have taken over our whole industry, not just, I told you that we paid our guys about $3 or $3.50 for that $6 job. Our overhead then was about 50% of what the salary was. The overhead is rent and utilities and secretary, whatever.
Right.
And today our overhead is like 150%. And that has been brought on by the new regulations, all the regulations that you have to, and the records you have to keep. And the federal government, of course, is worse than Fairfax County on that. But I'd say about 1,800 employees, probably 100 of them are just record keepers to satisfy the regulatory authorities that you have to.
Wow. Business has changed over the years.
Oh, it's just changed so much, it's unbelievable.
Well, and the types of industries have changed over the years. So Intelsat now is in the process of moving into the county. Maybe you could describe for the viewers what Intelsat is.
Yeah, well, Intelsat began back in 1964 as an intergovernmental organization, and it migrated to a commercial enterprise. So today we are a public company. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol I. We generate about $2.6 billion in revenues a year, and we operate globally. and we are in the network services, media, and government business. We have about 1,100 employees around the world.
Wow. And what sort of things do you do?
We own and operate satellites for media, network services, and government customers.
And you went through, I should have mentioned earlier that you were instrumental in the decision of the corporation to come to Fairfax County and to Tyson's Corner specifically. You were the point person on that.
Well, I think there were several of us, but yes, I was part of the team and delighted to be a part of the decision. And it was we did an exhaustive search in terms of where would be right for us to move next. We think that we have a great team, and so we didn't want to move very far, and we wanted to keep our workforce as intact as we could. But we did a search in Washington, in Maryland, and in Virginia, and we're delighted with our decision to move to Fairfax County, specifically Tyson's. And we hope we have as long and successful of a run as Sid you have here in the county.
You will.
For those who aren't aware where you're moving to one of the buildings that's right next to Tyson's Mall.
Right.
And it's, I think, 28 stories high. Are you the top 4 floors?
It's 20 stories high, and we'll be occupying the 12th to the 20th floors.
That's spectacular. You're going to have some nice views, if nothing else.
Yes, we are.
So, Sid, think back to 1964, which is also the year that Intelsat was founded and the EDA was created. 1960s, mid-1960s. What was the rest of the business community like?
Well, real estate dominated the industry for many years in Fairfax County. Around 1990, I guess, is when technology began to take off, and real estate sort of shrunk a little bit because the county is pretty well developed. And but in 1964, real estate really was a dominant. And I remember people like Marcus Bless, who owned all of Tyson's Corner, Tyson's 2 rather, and that was the highest point in Fairfax County. And he was quite a character. And then there was Eddie Carr, who was a real estate developer for Springfield, and it was his initiative that caused Shirley Highway, now 95, to be extended from Washington down towards Springfield. And Springfield was sort of a planned community. It was really in the country at that time. But of course, Shirley Highway became Highway 95 that goes all the way to Richmond now. But business then was done almost totally on a handshake. To a large extent, it still is, which is one thing that makes this region so great. The value system of the people who live here, the educational level is so high, was then too. That people trust each other, the culture that we have, and it was more so that way then than it is now. Although we had some guys that get out of line every now and then, but for the most part, business was done on a trusting relationship. You might make a contract that's 1 page long, it'd be more like a memo to record just exactly what you agreed to. Now, that contract is 30 or 40 pages long.
Right.
And the lawyers really had taken over when making this life more difficult. But it was a casual way of doing business. Our transportation system then was limited to Highway 29, Route 7, Route 236, I guess number 1 highway, and that was about it. Everything else was pretty much an unpaved road. The transportation system hadn't changed a whole lot.
Right, but they paved it.
They paved it. We do have 66, Highway 66, and Dulles Toll Road, and a few others.